당연히 당연히 제가 거기 동아리 주의치 네 직定义 대화 상유고 방식 토고거래 잔디 토발라 당연히 저기 심지어 탐지 상유고 방 토발라 발도지 인지 가르세네다 지기 뇽모바디게레서 제가랑은 뇽모바디 가와요르스는 아주 셈나리 요바리 제가 디네자 뇽모바디 엔지 모신바치 뇽모비기 균가리바 뇽모바디 균가리요르스 균바디 균데 하고바치 디네 하고는 뇽모바디리아 엔지기 삼나다 제바치네 균바 하고바치 디네 뇽모비기 님보 뇽균바 하고도 랑게 셈디 뇽모고 초소 마템 마송 把嘎进的保育sem给予桥电解保育电解的呢我能这个你给就直接你念不电解用么把的帮解你上有个把头把就个我的是的上这个的嘛这保育的没留个啦就是用么被给念用么被原的把这些解呢的呢也是 sem 的用么就是当有嘛的是在的给予桥当解你用么把的念不电解用么帮我的是
Good evening. Tonight then, we will continue to look at the fourth chapter of Shantideva's Bodhisattva's way of life. So this fourth chapter is a chapter on conscientiousness. So why are we looking here at conscientiousness? Well, as beings who want to experience happiness, the happiness that one really aspires for, desires, is a happiness that is lasting and stable, the happiness that is attained when one is liberated from the sufferings of samsara, and has attained the lasting happiness of Buddhahood, the state where one is perfectly skilled to be able to help others attain that same state, the state of enlightenment. To attain liberation from samsara and eventually Buddhahood, we have to abandon our afflictions. And our afflictions abide only in one place, on our own mind. In order to abandon our afflictions, we first have to come to know them, to recognize them, to see them for who they are, to recognize that they are the source of all our torment, all our pain. And this we have to come to recognize through hearing teachings, but primarily, based on those teachings, investigate our own mind so that we come to see the grave danger that the afflictions always keep us in. And thereby, recognizing the danger that the afflictions present to us, we develop a wish to eradicate them. And to do so, we need to rely on conscientiousness, because through a mind of conscientiousness, we can strive to accumulate virtue. And it's through the accumulation of virtue that we proportionately weaken and eventually will eliminate our afflictions and can progress towards and attain enlightenment itself. So therefore, we are now in this chapter on conscientiousness, or nearing the end of the chapter on conscientiousness. And the very purpose of the chapter is to get us to recognize, to guide us to recognize for ourselves the grave danger that the afflictions pose, and then to guide us to develop the strength of mind to strive to eradicate these afflictions through cultivating virtue.
개최되는 주요래 새벽에 저희들 다 전주심도 오다 공부도 다디 냠는 제옷 선비 되바 되니 유튜브기어도 근데 전주심 냠는 제야라 니를 사장 디바샤라서 봐 근데 개와사 디바사야라서 차야단 개와사야 되게 개주도 전주심 냠는 제야 된다라 근데 이제야 네 근데 전주심기에 전주심 초고는 다 전주심 담바 기제 그래서 심 기여도 제 심지어 탐지교도 등의 산유고가 토벌 지기 세디 케켈렘바이자 담제바자 다 심지어 탐지교도 산유고가 토발라 안에 소소리아 마토가 산이고가 지게 토발라 발도 찍히는 가래 마토비 유행 가래에서 영모 받기래 해서지 그래서 영모 받들이 안에 심지어에 판도 시엘이야 판도 제발이야 rangi kanga nyomo bade ye mewaje rang deja da hongro nyomo ba shawang so bade shala pado ji tu mare jesa shen le pando ge chim je bala rangi yu nyomo bade ge banggu wore rangi ge mashi bi yun de tamche shabar chi wore jesa dinesa anzo kissing gar shubare la sana jesa 소소라랑기 안지 가서래 샹리아 판도 간에 지그래 간에 지투그래 제비게다 뉴바 소소리아 뉴바 가야 유미 한 먹어 와지 내심제 탐지기도 나 산요 심제 탄줄에 펜버 두기 시베 삼다베나 디다다 차고 말해 디니에서 랑기 녀모바 빵와다 랑기 시지인데 메나 샹리아 판도 두투 말해 디엔사 안 소슈기 녀모바 바 님보 떼제 바 빵제 디니 님보데 빵와리아 안에 갈리아가 지여베네 배수제제 다딩에 갈래 가서 제투사 말에 당연히 바직 제샤생 있으면 미샤바지 배수제 준류제제 무디제 녀모바 님보 떼제 녀모데 방고 워레서 그 생각도 디슈르와데 디니마들.
So this text can be called, translated as engaging in the conduct of a bodhisattva or engaging in a bodhisattva's way of life. And what this text describes is how a bodhisattva lives their life, or what is the conduct that a bodhisattva engages in so as to fulfill their heart aspiration. So the text starts with the very first chapter on presenting the benefits of bodhicitta, so that one can give rise to the aspiration to become a bodhisattva oneself. The second chapter then is now, having generated a wish to become a bodhisattva oneself, one has to prepare one's mind. So one prepares one's mind through the dual process of the accumulation of virtue and the purification of non-virtue. So this is presented in the second as well as the third chapter. This is the process by which the practitioner prepares their mind in order to generate bodhicitta. And later in the third chapter, having accumulated virtue, in other words, strengthened our habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking, and purified non-virtue, in other words, weakened our habituation to non-virtuous ways of thinking, we then generate bodhicitta in the third chapter. Now, coming to the fourth chapter, we address the primary obstacle that we looked at, either an obstacle to the initial generation of bodhicitta, or once bodhicitta is generated, the obstacle to being of great benefit to others, what is impeding our capacity to be of benefit to others, and that is our afflictions. So in this fourth chapter on conscientiousness, we come to recognize that it's our afflictions that are not only preventing our attainment of our final goal of enlightenment, but is impeding our capacity to be of benefit to others right now. So here in this fourth chapter, we develop the deep determination to never come under the influence of the afflictions, to strive continuously to be mindful of our mental process and to eradicate the afflictions whenever they appear, and to ensure thereby our mind stays virtuous. To do so, we rely on conscientiousness. Then the specific verses that we looked at last week made this point very clearly, that even though right now a new bodhisattva is still very limited in their capacity to be of benefit to others, the bodhisattva, guided by this wish to help others ease their suffering, the bodhisattva, in order to help others ever more, needs to strive to eradicate their own afflictions. Because as the bodhisattva purifies their own mind of afflictions, their own inner good qualities can shine through ever more, and they can be of ever more direct, meaningful impact on the lives of others. And for the bodhisattva to do that, the bodhisattva needs to gather knowledge, receive teachings and guidance, and strive to cultivate the guidance in their own mind. Because it's up to each of us to come to recognize the afflictions for ourselves, the harm they bring to us and through us to others, and it's for us ourselves to strive to eradicate our afflictions, to subdue our own mind.
Diki nyamne yabo cheba la jimba dan sutren da soba da zunre samde paji jugi nyamne de rada labje di zo di nyamne yabo cheba la sim ba yu den gu re sa je 다 바위 되는 것도 변는 하는 저기 바위에서 되는데 아 저기 지단은 하는 저기 삼다베나 변는 하는 저기 가르치고라서네 칼라세시네 당봉하도 디기 칼라 디기 수보를 가르가 누구 말해서 도시 직삼다 심유체제 안디 누구 봐 아직 생규 돈에 나 현다게 지면배 돈에 직 바두스 디기 누구 되는 누구 디센델 누구 되는서 누구라서 도시 칼라가 누에게 봐 내가 하고 요도 인델이야 어때 딩에서 미에서 삼다이데 딜이야 셈디 바가고라 디사에게 셈디 디 사회가 되버디 가고 와. 이 디사기메 디사와나 가르친 생명은 디사는 알수 볼 얘기를 나스다 강한 책이었어. 디사기메서. 지선 디파 셈 데라 디초를 봐야 된 말이다. 코스 파 마다지. 예베지. 디나지 양한도 봐서 조세이네 제사자 냥아서고 시나서고 된시베네 야 되는 봐. 디서 하모거나 아직 로로한테 하고 봤는데 되게 사실 될이야. 근데 지금 뇌세다 되네 시나서고다 강한 책이 되는 유바 하고는 될 어디네디 두메 셈다이데 될 바가에 셈 델바 마저 가야 되고 에디가고 당아서 지단에 두신 디고로 받아 내가 가리네 ben 조세이나다 안사야 동야이나다 인디나시 어저께 미미 벤의 천자의 양아의 어디를 미디게 투지직 미디게 가르친 디 뇌야이 양아여서 될 바가고로 와 디가고로 와 제상하는 저기 치유고 되네게 유당 되네게 니에당 세당 되는라서 봐야 돼 지파까지 셈디셔서 마다도 될 냥아들 수급지 두고로 와 수급 어디 나신다 대비 돈다당 저기 바심 송사디 유카하를 잘못도 돈나지 버다 디 나신 삼다지 심송와 나신지는 나주 셈 나려야 가르두스 셈 나려야 되차기네 가르치고도 콩로기나 가르쳐 마야기네 가르쳐 지선 콩로기나 제뉴도 하샤라 뉴도 라라 뉴도 하신이가 강아용도 지선데 녀갑섬다나 강아리 디 몽바데 섬다바네 디기 아니 콩로디 제보디 아니 이치게 량한 바사바네 개와 치마 섬다바네 동아요나 책거래서 데네 인사다 이 콩로디 라주메 아셈베 콩로 바셈 두스타데 바이템 바와 셈 바이템 바스 디나진 되샤게바나 아니 지 되샤게바다 가르가르스 되샤기 지금 괜히게 삼다 어디 되샤기는 지금 되샤게 좀 매선베 두신 바 되샤 두신아 셈 가바딜레 바이템 바스고 와다 바이 건조 파마다 대수 땅샤바는 마음에 바래 대 땅샤바는 소소 강아티고래 베네 칼라세가 디니 귀인이 가마서 가린다 가서 세샤바는 대소소에게 류를 강아티고로 와 디나신 어디 잼고로 가고 대수 두신 귀인이 봐 통제 셈 디초서 마당와 용모바다 콩로바다 용모바 되샤다 디초서 마당와 샤고 그래서 지사리 바이템 거 디네 바이템 바이나 근데 수름도 와송 투르와现在甚至所觉个不什么怕什么那么就干些不能所觉如了，其实所觉呢也不好买的什么，看到给你所觉也不好买什么，怕干些不能所觉送过了吧，就是所觉买了吧，就是出里面送出过了吧，的呢，的其实先把有点些的牛毛白个。捐的给都是捐的用过来，牛毛白真的是好过些，就是我的什么dingen捐的就是给就没什么代的，真的给。제로치도 하고 보면은 어디디 야고요 말해서 남산 가투야. 근데 아직 한 먹어 줘서 아직 게 사바 있는 어디디 되는 좀 빼 노트 중시야. 제만 되는 게 좀에 선배삼다디 뒤에 좀 차고 당디.
What a bodhisattva trains in, what the bodhisattva trains their mind in, all these many practices is most commonly condensed down into the 6 perfections. And the very foundation for the 6 perfections is that of conscientiousness. Hence, this chapter here, just before one embarks on the other perfections. So conscientiousness is seen as a foundational training. And so to understand why so, we can take some examples from our own life. Because, first, before I do that, this word conscientious, it has the aspect of being careful, so it's sometimes translated as carefulness. So being conscientious has the aspect of being careful. So for example, now to take an example from everyday life, let's say one is regularly ill and one sees a doctor and it turns out one has a food allergy. Then one finds out that a particular food type presents grave danger for you. immediately you'll know, I have to stop that. Even if it's something that you've before you regularly ate and you took great pleasure, now you will see it very differently. If you see a particular type of food that you now know, if you eat that, you will become sick, perhaps even your life will be in danger, you won't desire it. You'll, with ease, push aside what before great desire would have arisen to enjoy. So what has happened here is that a person has come to recognize the danger that something poses to them. Now, how they relate to that is vastly different. Another illustration would be, you want to have a nice, relaxing holiday, and if you just go to the airport, you see what's the next flight, and off you go. Who knows where you're going to end up? But if beforehand you've looked where are good places to go, you perhaps check that government website, then you'll know that certain destinations are not holiday destinations at all. If one goes there, there perhaps is a lot of violence. You'll know to steer clear from it. So what's the meaning behind these two examples is that through gathering knowledge and also thinking about that knowledge, seeing its relevance to you, your way of thinking will change, and thereby your behavior. And it will change in a way that is sincere. It's not contrived or manufactured, but sincere. So here, the practitioner is being guided by Shantideva to recognize the grave harm that the afflictions pose, to recognize how the afflictions have been enslaving us and hurting us in limitless ways since beginning this time, life after life, and will always continue to do so. That is their very nature. So Shantideva has guided us to recognize this. And we thereby develop the mind of conscientiousness, this mind where we are careful about our own mental process, on guard against the arisal of the afflictions. So when one really comes to understand the danger the afflictions pose for oneself, recognizing how when they arise, they destroy any peace of mind that we have, and through their expression, we destroy the peace of mind others may be enjoying, as well as creating the causes for further suffering in lives to come. When we recognize that, we'll want to come to know these afflictions ever more. We want to see how they arise. What are the situations that stimulate or trigger our afflictions? And then, with that, armed with that knowledge, as well as our conscientiousness, our wish to be on guard, to be careful, when we need to be in certain circumstances, we'll know, now I have to be careful. Now I have to be careful. And in a sense, the training is quite similar to how animals need to live. When they are aware that a certain area is populated by predators, they will stay clear. But if they have to go there, they'll be very careful. They'll be on guard. So this is what the Bodhisattva does, and certainly this is how us as aspirant Bodhisattvas, we need to be on guard against these afflictions, recognizing the grave harm that they pose. And this is done through the process of gathering knowledge and then meditating on that knowledge. So this word meditation, we should always relate to it through its synonyms of habituation or familiarization. So what we're trying to do is develop wholesome, virtuous, habitual ways of thinking. Develop our habituation to virtue. This is the purpose of meditation.
당번에 되는 여러분은 말과 당번에 꼭 dinji 당번 미리게 두시는 직 제 되네 마부를 되네 지겨 말을 검시 수여신 결혼 근데 샘리 앞에 검시 친구 수여해서 이디나 개인으로 수여나 소속의 루제 파 루세 따달만 뭐 간주만 유예디 삼로도 유네 지금말에 삼로도 결혼도 샘 한게 나려야 그 라신 길이 거래 디가르스 두 신야만 두 저희도 검시 수여비기 검비원고 따두 신 당번에 되네 되지 검비원기 다 되네기 제게 자원이 되버는 거没想到 되버 제베나 어다 디마서 노서 디디미는 선배 삼로 디거로 봐 디가르스 니만 두 신진 디 가르스 디파 간주마 유샤바나 쪽바 차기도 거기를 내그래 장마 차기마 거기 쪽바 차나 내나서 단지 교망부 연구를 했으면 내내기 교연 통하지 거기 쪽바 차는 내나서 연구해 봐 교연 통하지 되게 교연 따지 디 교연이 파 마향에게 돈다라 파 잼거 잼지도 시네 안에 직도시 직제여도 되고 미유메라 마도 수미 연나면나 곧 소바지 차사 다보게 집에 장마치 코리아도 그래서 검시유예요. 제산디 저한테 배심 한개 나야 유예지 버지로. 어디 나시리다 데네기 검시 명함절이야 아니 당번 마도 어디 지역으로 장마치로 랍게 미 검시에 메네 검시면은 안에 lumba카시나리아 칼라자는 베능한주기 나라로 세븐 사세 람사 바바도 유샤다 설마라자 가르사베나서 바바 판모도 람사 유샤다 차 근데 지게 침바다세나 동북하와네 미신 다시에서 제가 또 제가 검시메로와 지금 이 검시메와 가르치는 어디지네 약보요 말 디진 괜 쪽 거기 쪽바 차이로 거기 쪽바 차나 안줄에 네기리 나저 연구를 해서 비 삼로도 괜 홍고 말 괜마다 와서 괜 딜마다 완자 네 델이야 안데 지게 니가소리 데니기 기년 가지고 먼저 쪽고 써야려 쟁구와 말 지금 바위 띵고 말 대마제마자 아니 디 검시 거라 리트고 말 삼로마다도 검시 리고 말와 삼로 당한 지게 검시여 봐서 다 데니기 거기 삼다베네 검시 유배진이다 아신게 셈나 한게 나를 기는 제임에서 수지나 즉 뒤민도 셈배 삼로 예지 연구로 봐 어디나시 나중에 녀모 발에 귀에 콩라서네 귀에 되자게 귀에 되는지 하고 되네 귀에 어디디 야부 민도 셈배 야네야도 삼귀다 즉 귀에 딜 맞아 봐 디파 마기에게 삼다자 당진에 안딜레 도쇼 야디 지 콩로기 도쇼 잠바다 삼바 저것은 아니 게디네 아니 두스는 검시수여도 코르긴 다다 지금 민도 샘백을하면서 마기야지다 안디 게시 직도스기베나 어다지 마기바 차야 콘도스기베나 남유니가 콘르시라 마기바 즉 검시지 예나 콘도스기나 어다 마기바니 빼사서 샘백이 되네기 검시 차거로 되는 두지네 제가 녀모베 균두 제는 균통 강아를 균유바 두지 안에 양도 삼다도 어디 지기 민도 샘백 삼로데 안에 양도 당여도 되네 검시를 마선데 제여도 안디 녀모베 쳐서 마선하디 연구를 해제래 지사디 그 녀모베 균망고 즉 빼지 가왔는데 나도 그진 마스만 녀모베 균자야 신뢰 만들 와도 송송하대 그래서 된다지리도 검시수요도 하다가지
In Australia, you have a very strong habit of not littering. So this is very clear to me. I never see anyone litter. I don't drive along roads and see packets being thrown out of a window or see garbage on the side of the street. Everywhere is very clean. And why is this? Well, former generations decided this is not acceptable behavior. We keep our homes clean, we keep our gardens clean, so we should keep our communal areas clean too. So perhaps your parents' generation made this decision and they trained you as children. And you have this now as a very deep-seated habit. And I can say with confidence, and you can recognize this within yourself, that the thought to litter it never comes. And if you were in a particular situation where you had to throw a packet out of the window of your car, you'd feel an aversion to do that. It would just feel so wrong to do. So why do you have this way of thinking, this habit? It's come about independence on hearing reasons, thinking about those reasons, and accepting them, and having lived in accordance with that decision for a long time. You're not now, as adults, following what your parents told you to do many decades ago. They're not here to see. You're doing it because you believe in it. You know it is the right thing to do. In other countries, you know this is not the case. People litter everywhere. They may eat some sweets, and the packet will go on the floor. If they need to urinate, they will find a wall and they'll urinate. If they need to spit, they will spit. And why is that? All that is missing is they do not have the habituation not to do it. In fact, they have the habituation to do it. There'll be a different set of reasons by which that behavior is seen as acceptable. And therefore, they follow that habit. Here, based on opposing reasons, a contrary habit has been developed. That's all it's about. So this is what we are trying to do with our mind in relation to the afflictions. And that has been the primary topic of this chapter. That through repeatedly reflecting on the faults that the afflictions bring, both in formal settings, such as when we are together now, or when you're at home doing your formal practice, but also throughout the day, seeing what happens when the afflictions arise, see why they arise and what the result of them is, coming to the same conclusion again and again. The afflictions only cause harm. They only ever cause harm. This is all they can ever do. There is no circumstance ever that the afflictions are acceptable. The afflictions do not lead to skillful behavior. They impede my capacity to think clearly and make good decisions. So we need to develop this habituation. Again, this is the meaning of the word meditation. This habituation to recognizing that the afflictions are never acceptable. So that when we recognize when stirring within, there's an immediate aversion, a repulsion towards it. And in this way, conscientiousness guards us from ever being deceived by the afflictions. For example, thinking, oh, just this time, I'll follow my mind of attachment. Or on this occasion, anger is justified. What that person did is wrong, and therefore anger is justified. By reflecting well, developing a deep habituation and aversion to these afflictions, one will break one's habituation to them, and the habituation one will have developed is to virtue, based in conscientiousness. So this is the primary topic of this fourth chapter.
samlo kharin ko sa shale nyewa chege samlo de gyuni khogo mara da gyuni ho mara ko komshiro shale pempa kyan yo dugi sambe samlo di gomba yinza ane gidi na samlo shale pempa dugi sambe samlo ma do shale nyewa jigin sambe samlo de gyuni khogo mara 그래서 shale nyewa jigin sambe samlo de gyun tong che ya wo min su pa samlo pa ga che ne da shale pempa dugu du sambe samlo de pa yane ya do 장 gomdo 장도를 쳐봐서 니기 shale pempa dugi jambada zewa ninje se 쥐마마이 비게와자 기디바자 제선바데게래 삼로나 셴레 녀바 쳐와서면 삼로 죽이는 거 말아. 그래서 셴레 그디네 펜바 주고도 가는 펜바 주고 등에 펜바 가는 주고서 배 삼로 좀 해야 매러. 그래서 디네자 난주네 다 제자 자주심 냠는 제발라 녀모베데 반님보 괜다 괜통하지 녀모베 님보 된제 도시는 공부래서 숨고를 받아.
So for us, we take this as something we have to do. A bodhisattva has already developed this conscientiousness very well. This is to make sure, this training for the new bodhisattvas, to make sure their conscientiousness is very stable within them. Because a bodhisattva has developed this aversion to harm, aversion to the afflictions. For the bodhisattva, there's never the thought to act in a way that will directly or indirectly harm another. In fact, if the bodhisattva is aware that a certain course of action will bring harm to someone, they have a visceral reaction to that, a deep repulsion to acting in a way that may potentially bring harm to others. And this is because of the deep warmth and tenderness with which they hold all beings. And they are able to do so naturally in an uncontrived manner because of the success they've had in repelling the afflictions. Wholesome, virtuous minds for a bodhisattva arise naturally. They are uncontrived. They are a reflection of who the bodhisattva is. This is how the bodhisattva lives, with minds that are wholesome, dominant. This is because they are deeply habituated to this way of thinking. They don't need to try. This is naturally who they have become. Let's continue then with the 43rd verse. This will be the object of my clinging and resentment in the war I wage, though these types of afflictions are exempted, as they are destroyers of afflictions.
Dila dagi shenjashin dila deje kazin shubanashin dedi shumatato nyumoba sede nganzulia tsedeleya nganzuli nyumoba di nudo kewachima nganson de dunganyoji nyumoba nyu resha 제자다 코와 löje 탈바다 탐지기비 고바 마토바 지게 되 nyumoba 제자 nyumoba 균 랑을 자오 원에다 라신이가 탐절을 자오 뭐마디다 nyumoba 선비게 삼다지 nyumo바디 균 자오이 하고 같이 되는 nyumoba 님보서 nyumoba 빠야 뒷방 매봐서 오스비 디 nyumoba 님보 띵고 그래서 딜라시도 nyumoba 님보 딜라서 nyumoba 균 통하지 nyumoba 님보 딜라 다기 신자제스다 nyumoba 님보 딜로 소소하게 배주 제제 아니 지게 예 가서 체도 아주 공부해서 신자됐어요.
Having then reflected deeply for a long time on the faults of the afflictions, recognizing that the afflictions have been harming beings throughout their lives and will continue to do so until they are eradicated, and recognizing that the afflictions can only bring harm, they cannot bring benefit, but they actually enslave beings, enslave them in suffering. And having come to recognize that the sole enemy for each being is actually the afflictions. And the afflictions that not the afflictions on others continue, the afflictions on their own continue. Having come to recognize deeply the faults of the afflictions, here one comes to commit to rely on the antidote. And that first word, the antidote to the afflictions, and the first word, this will be the object of my clinging. So the word this refers to the antidotes to the afflictions. This is what I will rely on.
Nyumoba nyimbo dila sidu nyimbo dila la nyimbo gareshi sebora chimiero da nyimbo sebora swesha na dinade ngaso peson shubena nyumoba nyimbo dame ba topiki sherap tomboni tope dame ba tope sherap dila shenche se pe shenbala na telmi pe yakbore shat be yakbore dingi bezu jene yamna jigese be jejeade shenbas be ngana jige 유인이 접어질 민의 착신세우라 차리 신발로 닝베베야 오르세 딩하 고고도 스페시 우징 파 담진 제저로 와 신바스로 와 디나시 단 요모베 냠보 다음에 또 베시럽 디 디장 하고면도 다 디레샤 선배게 다음에 또 베시럽 딜레바 이 요모베 냠보 원에 디레샤 스베 딜레야 지 지요야고 시우 토제 간에 안시해바 디단 니 냠는 지기 스베 체도가제 도신 배수신 냠는 지기 스베 다 시해바서 디네시 고고래.
To be really specific then, this word, this, refers to the antidote to the afflictions. This is what I'm going to rely on. So it's specifically, the word this refers to relying on the wisdom, realizing emptiness. This is what I am going to strive to cultivate within. This is what I am going to rely on. And so we, as very ordinary beings, the way we can relate to the strength of what is being related to here is in the same way that we run after, grasping at, clinging at whatever it is that we are attracted to, whatever we desire. That is a strength of mind that the Bodhisattva has for the antidote to the afflictions, the wisdom realizing emptiness.
on the Gomores. The new condo son, you did the condo soon, yes, the condo soon said that your mom was Yomo, Jidang to Quincy and Mitchell Magan, bed could bet to young equal never jeans, a goblin could never see you call a jeans, some of the tools moody in the Vasilo Quincy or what. On the nation, Yomo Batella, bed and Yomo Bade, Duja shoes a draw one in Yomo Badesha, said Della and Yomo Badesha, said him, Yawachimang also draw on Yomo Badesha, the Jivanazita. Tarba 탐지 김이 고바 토바도 녀모 받을 누가 지면도 녀모 받을 게 마바데 탐메 코메바 마스는 탐메서 비게 두신의 셈리아 나슈 녀모 받을 괜다지 디메바 쇠기 셈비게 삼론의 무지제 진바데라 안에 진바데라 콘도송서 녀모 받을 콘도송서.
So this word clinging can also be translated as obsession or addiction. So this shows the strength or the determination that the Bodhisattva has to rely on the wisdom realizing emptiness. This then continues in the second line, and resentment in the war I wage. So resentment, again, the way it's usually used is when we resent someone, we think about them a lot. We hold a grudge against them. And not just do we hold a grudge against them, we want harm to come to them. And we will plot and we will plan and think of a skillful way, a devious way that we can bring harm to them. So this is how us ordinary beings think. But the Bodhisattva has that kind of attitude, but towards their sole enemy, the afflictions. And the weapon that they'll use to bring harm, to destroy their afflictions, is the wisdom realizing emptiness.
And in a delo Yomobala Kondusun, Yomobe, Yamba Dame to be sheriff the chair, the baby Chashin, Shenje, Gabuchi, Shembaje. Dagarjo was the Ultes, when you march up to Resuda, Ultes, Quentin Jesse, Yomoba Della, Dedang, Sosuke, Gamiche, Dame to be sheriff, but that when you Ultes, when you march up to Resuda. That march of Jules Danza, Jidamaja, Chichi Mel said, Margin, Chichi Mel said, Chesanta Kaji March of Yul Jesse, Koni March, Chamber the Majava, Yul say Majava, so sure. That Donala, Dame about to be shut up to Gomjene, young Gomjin, or computer dungeon, Yomo, but the Mavaso, is what that. Margin, Pasha the Mavaso, what is that? Dame about to be shut up to Gom, Uteva Nashi. The Dami about to be shared, you come in put tension, then you get conscious you Jahong Ngoma, Yomo body, and it part Mavas or his or the Bango his or you'll take this.
So what is being resented are the afflictions, because it's recognized that this is what causes one harm, and through them one brings harm into the lives of our mother beings. So there's a deep determination against these afflictions expressed here as a resentment towards them. And to show the strength of expression and the strength of the determination, the analogy is made of waging a war. So just like in warfare, both sides are striving to destroy, to kill the other. That is actually what's happening here, in that the very function of afflictions is to destroy happiness, to kill virtue. This is the very function of what the afflictions do, their purpose. This is their very nature. Here, though, the practitioner is determined to utilize the weapon of wisdom. Through wisdom, the afflictions can be defeated and destroyed and vanquished.
Yulje said, Majaba said, Tick Dovish Core, the Dondala Karkugo, Yul Site said, Dame about to be shared to Gomje, Nimbo Dame about to share to Gomje, Pa and Digi and Yomoba, Yosaki, Yomoba, and Yomoba, so doesn't Marik Badi, Bango Grace, Mavasu Grace, and that is more.
So the reason why this language has been chosen, so clinging or obsession or addiction, in the next line, resentment, and then war, the reason why such emotive language is chosen is because it stirs us inside and it illustrates the determination and the commitment required in order to actually gain success, the complete eradication of the afflictions.
Nyomobe nyimbo dame bo to be shared the pay yapure somebody shen said that it go that is shen said the school word dame bo to be shared that delay haba mindu tip nyomobe jumela then nyimbo dame bo to be shared delay haba minti yapo shure sha somebody gane and titani nyamlen jigi sebige sometime did that shen said go word kon said the kondu song said 녀모바데 딱 라신이가 강아지 누가도 규디 녀모바데 샤다 녀모바데 매워마서는 탑미도 선배 삼로시여와 델레 컨세고 고고르다데.
So this word clinging or this obsession the practitioner has is for the antidote. So that very first word, so the obsession, the clinging is for the wisdom realizing emptiness. Wisdom realizing emptiness, and the resentment that is directed towards the soul enemy, the afflictions.
Kunzi the Shenba, the Shenchalan, Numin, on the Shencha to a chat, said Gogorua. Kunzi said the Shenli never shaggy, the Kunzi. Chisa on the Numu Kunzi in a Banjarwa. Banjare. Chisa a Shencha Udil, Shencha, the Shencha said, Lodi Bancha Chaurua, Chisa Chagurua. Chisa Dineza, or Daddy, Di Kunzi in your Morua, and did Gomia Marua, so that. The dual some legal what the Kunzi did my Kunzi soon do. That Shencha said, and then Bangja Yomo is Banjare, and the Kunzi said Banjara, Dibra, Diba the Kunzi Jena, Diba Yungure, and the Shencha Jena, Diba Yungure, and the Shencha said the Kunzi was a Jigman was a big, some of the wash legal.
In the third line, then, a question is posed. Though these types of afflictions, so this is referring to clinging. So clinging is, or attachment, we know is an object that needs to be abandoned. So too is resentment, a mind that wants to bring harm, that's intent to bring harm. These are usually objects to be abandoned. So here then a question is being raised. But surely, how can you be talking about clinging and resentment? These are minds to be abandoned.
Nobody also Yamar the Lenchi Sungor, the Len you but you Doba you but how to work. Just a land the person number did Yomo Basur. Says that it is the number Yomo but Dorish or Yomo number Dorish, Yomo had been the new Quanzin said the Dang Shensha saying the Bendigo Dilla Dagi Shenja Shin City. Don't want you to be shared up Yomo, but damn about to be shared up till I Shanguri said that. Then you did and the music you need to tell Shencha said, Coin number two, said. Cousin, you did a number on the Yomo, Shencha said, you did me to pay Yakutu, tell it thing I'll go to be called Chaba Chagua. Did I discharge of an action that did Yomo, but cousin, don't want you to be damn about to be shared up the Shencha. That damn about to be shared at Yomo, but did it happen, pay Yakuresha, that ding in Yaman jeans and Damsi Jachua, the number two Chagua. You cover number two chagua, you cover it. Says number two chagua, yes. The consistency young, consistency of the Munishalia, Konga, how go up Jen came well, never cheap Konga, can't dig in Sebi, Lenji, Gavin Sebi, some moody something to consider. Just Delia, just a Yomo, but a bit to judge a thing in never mustn't tap me the con never swing Sebi some tangurova. Yomo never swing some tangura. Just a consin did that. Nyomo but never swing someone you would sometimes number two yes number did Yomo but that which is over that.
In this answer, still in the third line, though these types of afflictions, here one is being reminded of the meaning of in this context of clinging and resentment. We need to understand, as I've explained, how these words are used here, what the meaning in this context is. So just like ordinary beings desires something beautiful, the Bodhisattva has such a clinging or obsession for the supreme object, the wisdom realizing emptiness. And in the same way that people, ordinary people, have resentment towards something that they despise and something that they won't ever tolerate, something they never want to have around them, the Bodhisattva has a mind likened to resentment towards the afflictions. So this is how we should understand these words. Whilst there are words of the afflictions, their meaning here they are used here in a more skillful manner to invoke the sense of determination required.
Number Numo Badan to Kunzina Shin Chas and Dovure Rete, Donda Momala, the Nomo be Jumjeres, Nomo be Jumjeres, Nomo never says, then Dame by the Nimbo, Dame to be share up the pay, Yahoo's Shenjadi, me Gomgis sometimes change Chai Shembatida, Nomo Bala Dukjara, that he never so good to be Kunzin, Nomo Bala Kumbi, the next summer Niboti, Nomo never say Jumjere, Nomo Mares, Nomo never say Chagores. 제가 녀모 점치 마도서 쓰리 그 녀모 점치를 녀모 매버서야리 마도 녀모 공도 말해서 녀모 말해서 마도서 쓰리 녀모 공수 도고 말해서 그 녀모 매버서야리 해서
Shiba.
녀모 점치 마도서 쓰리.
And the fourth line, are exempted as they are destroyers of affliction. So this sort of makes it clear that one's clinging for the antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, is directed towards the object of resentment, the afflictions. And this is the means by which the afflictions are destroyed. Hence, these terms here are to be exempted because their meaning is so very different. Shantideva continues in the 44th verse. Being burnt to death, or even having my head cut off, is preferable to those ever-present afflictions, my mortal enemy, to whom I will never submit. Looking at the first two lines, being burnt to death, or even having my head cut off. So of course, it goes without saying, to have this happen to anyone is something terrible. So this goes without saying. But when we take the perspective of the committed practitioner, let alone that of a bodhisattva, a committed practitioner is very aware of the innumerable lifespans and unimaginable life forms that we've already lived in over an inconceivable span of time. So the terrible happenings of any one life are the terrible happenings of that one life alone. So from this very broad perspective, even something terrible, such as being burnt to death or having one's head decapitated, even something like that, from this broad perspective, is seen as something that is harming only this one brief life. And compared to the expansive lifetimes we've already lived, let alone those still to come, this is a brief moment.
안디나시 소수기 고 제제 바두시나 제는 설배네 소수야 진나자다 강아 중국으로 와다가서 지기 최에 선마다는 체딜에 디네기 소수기 류딜에 하바 강아 지메바 쇠디 판바지 요마로 와디 판보 휴시로 와 이내 디 강아 중국어 때 강아 대 녀에 대 디삼기 지기 되시마도 요마레스 디 강아 디기 베능아즈 메르 세베네 강아 제디기 메세기 세기 균디기 제와 치마를 강한 유튜브 말이었어. 다른 소소 고어 제반은 고어 제반이 고어 제긴 디다 디니 가리네 제베 디촌디기 세디점라 뉘에지 소소 소도 매바 수투고르마도 제와 치마리아 나송마 치둥어녀야다. 아니 지기 유니고 녀토야 가이고서 말데 가마 하시지 주제 하시지를 약간 아티고래. 디 누가 추조래서 그런다지서.
Again, it goes without saying that the suffering of being burnt, in particular if one's burnt to death, this is intense. Or the suffering of having one's life taken through violence, this is intense. But this suffering is suffering that is experienced solely in this one life. That suffering does not necessarily impact lives to come. So whilst one suffers intensely in these ways, it is only suffering in one life.
다 되니기 녀몽벌 삼다와이나 세상아주 길에 여기 녀몽바디기 세텔이야 소수게 강아지야 동아지야 샬레 너버지야 아니 세텔이야 마치보서야 배 강아지야 세텔이야 강아지고래 디멘베게다 두삼다만 세텔 녀몽바지 디고 레가바 디바 녀몽바 슉쳐보 제 두자르 제베나 디 레가바사 디기원 나선은 마지디 동아바도 매번 용거야 차야다 배 무지지 균류고 용거야 차고래서 지난다 코와 토마 매번에 삼다베냐 아주 코와 토마 매번에 녀모비기 나다 바동아 탈바 탐지기 묘고와 토모도 코와 냐냐 코르제 누가냐데 녀모바 제바레스 지난다 녀모바다 인가즈 다지 류리 세기 메데당 인가즈 고체기 지 제제 강아 체이 삼다베데 뒤수 통도지 감 하시지로 보치데 녀모바게 강아 제사 삼다베데 체델레 강아 개와 치마레 무디로 빠도 매바 강아 무디네 강아 용거에 차기도 와서 제사딘이 두스네 녀모버지 차기도 와 되네 인자 녀모버 넘버 군도 녀모베 잘라 뒤버 고어 가서 뒤버 미자오 세데 세상에 녀모버세데 다 뭐마디 땅에 뒤게디나 게디네 녀모버 차들이야 고고메스 델이야 녀모마티 바제 뒤버 미자오세데 녀모버를 꾼다 녀모버를 녀모 띠마티 바딩이 남야 뒤메스 냠나 뒤고 고고메스 사실 남보 군도 녀모베 잘라 뒤버 미자오세 뒤바제스는 베네 지기 전에는 소소하다 지고 콜 하다가 시에니 콜바이 지파 다 결혼 가시네 지가 쇼송 사지로와 디 뒤바시오라 디 제가 녀모베 잘 뒤고 마시스더니 녀모바데 뀌에나 게디 이내고 녀모베 샤와다 마송와제 텔레 녀모 땡제 아니 거 매바서에게 배수시 탑르지기 제 오래서 오다
Looking at the whole verse. So whilst the intense pain of being burnt to death or having one's head cut off, whilst this is intense suffering, the truth is it only lasts for a few moments in a single life and then it's past. But on the other hand, the verse continues. So such suffering is preferable to those ever-present afflictions. So even such intense suffering is seen, when looked at with the eye of the Dharma, with the eye of wisdom, even such suffering is seen as preferable to the ever-present afflictions because the afflictions harm us throughout this lifetime, and in fact, they harmed us in every life up to this, and they will continue to harm us in every life beyond this, as long as they are dominant within us. And they won't only harm us in this a relatively pleasant life of a human being. But through these afflictions, we end up being propelled helplessly to the lower realms. So when we think of the intense suffering of being burnt alive or having our head of being decapitated, compared to that intense suffering, the intensity of the suffering in the lower realms is so much worse and for so much longer. And that suffering is being experienced by limitless beings now because of their afflictions. And such suffering may well befall us again because of our afflictions. So therefore, those ever-present afflictions, my mortal enemy to whom I will never submit. So the conclusion of the verse is similar to the verse before, this expression of determination. My afflictions are my mortal enemy. These are whom I need to wage war against. And just like in warfare, one can never rest or relax in the face of the enemy. One must ensure one overcomes these afflictions through relying solely on the antidotes, never allowing the afflictions to deceive us so that we end up being fooled by them to follow them, rather to always be on guard against them and to apply the antidotes. And in this way, we commit to never submitting to the afflictions.
tarvada temji kimbe ko tomo de nyomo baresha nyomo jesha ta nyomo ba digi lesa le yiwange da jige ngandro le dunga pa do me ba nyojue de nyomo baresha sbe nyomo ba gyön thong shi ne ta nyomo be ni bo den da me ba to be shera gomba la ya be ju jeje ta lu da sem na gang ga je ne gang la ma zue ba je ande jige be ne gang dige be ne so su ge me le se zue be ne gang chu chu le 고제는 세배나 강아 충주에 대해서 세디즘이 강아마도 아니 샤다 제와 치마다 되는 용토야 가요 말에 강아 채 가요 말 지속이 진짜 되네 삼다 류다 셈리아 강아 가세 채배네 배수의 제제 될이야 말씀 슈범에 봐지 전주계제 아니 요모바들이야 다 드링의 요모바데 매와 마순데 탑민도 세배다 요모바 샤와도 마주어제 요모바 소소랑기 파 온도 교수바 지긴 셈배 삼다제 요모바 님보 대주 공개 셈배다 셈슈를 마소네 되네게 셈슈 계제 제고고레스 얘네는 배주지 냠는 제고고레스 거다 요모바 봐야래.
The meaning of this verse is then that these afflictions have been harming each of us since beginningless time. Every single problem we've ever experienced is due to our afflictions. Every suffering experience we've ever had is due to our afflictions. Every difficulty in life we've ever experienced or ever will is because of these afflictions. And this will continue to be the case until eventually we attain our own liberation. Through this recognition, then, we come to see that whatever hardships are required in applying the antidotes, those hardships are preferable. In fact, they are insignificant to the alternative, continuing to suffer due to these afflictions. So thinking like this, reminding oneself of this again and again, becomes really quite easy then to rely on the antidotes, even joyous to rely on the antidotes. And in this way, one can persevere with joy in relying on the antidotes.
Dine zadang jike tadus che samda de kabla da nyomo ba se de lamsa nyomo ba se de chilo de san janda ji samma ta ba je da nga ju so so gu la samdang gu sa ra da so so du samda de kala nga gu ji da de kabla ya khon ra la yo ra kabla de ja ki ya yo ra kabla nga se ba nga rang chi sing ye samlo jisan desu pe du ja re sha sa du shin ne bene da nga ju kisin nyama shu so chiro ge ta di ani dang mo ne ma re ko kien ji te de mi tu ba cha re ha ji ya bo je ba chen bo je ne nian chai yu tu bu re jisan dang mo ne ma re nyu mo ba de dang mo ne di re ko le ya go bu ga ji ne du ro ma ya ro ya ma re ni mo dang mo ne re se di da ji ba do di re de ya jisan di na shi je chiro ge kien ji sui ba de je ba ga 되는 시리에서 그래서 쌤做牛毛被摘的牛是米的现在的记录给咱们是都说给쌤 유와도说쌤 유규 쌤 유토네找学习吧的쌤 유토네 아직 냠는 제지나 소소를 현기 소소를 녀바치베네 텔야베 직 코가 닝제다 코 말이야 코 콩러사이 코코를 녀모고 샤모도 송어래 송어제 말이야도 시거를 닝제에서 코 랑와 요머스 코를 닝제 코미야 안 소소라는 게 될 닝지에서 미들이야 소소를 님이 미들随便님의 지어도 소소 자오 책을 주지 년차 소소야 다 년이 전에 따이도 베네 소소야 거의 녀시도 소소기 개인 냠는 지야야 随便냠는 지야야 베 随便냠는 숙셔 따야로 그 핑거로 제사데 ፔ메자 소소리 랑을 판도 제한들이 년다고 그러와 제사 저어 소소 녀바 지킨디 소소리야 随便냠는 제 핑도 빼하고 주소 그 판도 침부 주소 베 소소 년으로 따야다 되네 encore 요모베 샤와서 랑 요마레 세비기 니지 공대 콜 니지 삼다데 소수규를 니지 영어 공부도 펴와다 소수규 냐면 안데 随便 냠는 어 공부도 펴와 제거로 봐 제상 소수규 삼리 땅탕이 토네 소소를 네베지 미지 네베지기나 소수규 삼리 땅탕이 토네 자오마 되어지 인차도야다 소소리야 안 소수규 잠니지 기회초 삼리 뭐 공부 펴도 도와준 거로 봐 제상 현이도 실 요모바들 되는 메로 요모바 콘도지 요모바 삼단 소주기를 요모신 요모바들 파치다베네 닌시 삼네 니지게메 델레 펜바 삼다베네 안 디두르마도 소주기위체 냠야 기위섬 냠야 유심는 녀 예만 판도 가야네로 봐 세상에 자원 모든 요모바레샤 세상 요모바들 봐愿大或者愿读书读这用这毛不愿毛不愿什么的，这在什么东西？但愿毛不这毛帮的特别的，愿毛不找我的南面毛个我这个你不买点把下个面你不定这面把随便这边个都现在什么当我来是这了对不没叫我都写我来是送人地里头啊。
Our afflictions, this mortal enemy, it abides nowhere other than on our own mind, our own continuum. So our inner world, our inner comings and going within our own mind, this needs to be the object of our mindfulness, the object of our focus. And we need to be aware of how the afflictions arise and what the effect is, coming to recognize how they only bring harm. Also, we need to come to recognize in the process of their arisal, not just what the stimulus for them, the arisal of the afflictions are in terms of the object that they're directed towards, but the inner process, how they all arise from the ignorance of self-grasping. This too needs to be recognized. And by focusing on one's inner enemy, these afflictions, one will get to recognize that just how unique they are in terms of the plethora of enemies that we have had. Because our afflictions are alone in only being able to bring harm. They have no other capacity than to harm. Whereas those people we've known in our life that we haven't got on with, perhaps those who we had grave problems with and who did cause us a lot of harm in our life, that is not in their nature. And as we saw in several verses before, that with our external enemies, as we know from our experience in this life, even someone who has caused us harm, minor or significant, that relationship can change. That relationship can change. But with our inner enemies, our afflictions, that never can happen. We can never befriend them because their nature is to deceive. It is to take advantage of our naivety. It is their nature to harm us. But with an external enemy, no matter how awful they are, by having come to recognize our own mind, come to understand the workings of our own mind well, when they act towards us or speak towards us in an unkind manner, we will immediately recognize that they are afflicted. And therefore we know they have no control. They have lost control. Their afflictions are now dominant. The afflictions are the master and they are the servant. Then it's easy for compassion to arise. And with compassion arising, we will be patient. Our mind will not be afflicted and we can respond wisely, skillfully. And if we are consistent in this, our relationship with them will change. And eventually, maybe we just will be okay together, or who knows, one may become friends or even a close friend. That is all possible. And it comes about through changing our way of thinking. Through changing our way of thinking, we become happier, we accumulate virtue, and we benefit others. But with our afflictions, this is never the case. It can never be the case. They only bring harm. So this we need to be constantly aware of, watching the inner workings of our mind, seeing the role the afflictions play, recognizing they never benefit. They only deceive, bring harm and pain.
All those in the some diet, Tinigi, Danganju, Diniga some diet, Tizan Yumo body, do Gidine, Delia, Yimo Denji, Bangi, Dynamia Kumi, Sati, do some diet. That Dinigi, D couple, and some time that Diro at the Yumo Bass. Takiti Bango, Sachi, Gidi Bangorism, Gidi Bangoridana, and that in a Bango research. Nimbotingo, Nimbati Kumi, the Gidium, that in a Congo research. Cesati Magumba, Edishi young ever Marbas. Sinishi the Comia, Cesana to meet the Mills of the Chiwamitawa. Cesada, and it tin that didn't meet Comia in Chabaji, the Nishi tin the Yubit couple of Mahom, the best as a big tenjubility to some tangorova. Cesar Denigo Gongo, Cesar Denigi, Tending, didn't Yamlenchi, tin Chabaji, Yumo, Yimbotiacum, Yatin Chabaji, Melbourne, the didn't imagine that Gedishi that you go up to the best as a listen. 다 게디지 오르라나 다 게디시 해봐 요말 게디나 다데는가 되는 요모데 임포트 고메디 베스 제호스베 다데는 제호도 제자디 되는게 다지 가지고 된슈 된체와다 치워미다바디게 삼다리도와 제자디네 자다디 요모 부방고 되는 임포트 제자디네 임포 빠다 리버팅 핸디 라마디 베마식 자침보다 제게 개진침보 쉬우시려 왔으면 섬다들 비비시인 데서 섬다 차단이 그거로 진짜 두시는 냠는 지디갑라 디니기 수수 섬단 디갑랴 두시네 지게 비비시인 데서다 아니 다시 된지 된체와다 아니 지게 지원마다 받기 두시는 염도 디니셋 디진 섬다들이 자산 염도로식 예투가를 차고로 와다.
We've heard here the need to commit to never being deceived by the afflictions and to rely on the antidotes, in particular the wisdom realizing emptiness. So when is the time to commence? When is the time to strive in this? Now is the time. There is no valid reason to delay. Only loss will come through delay. So for those of you who are also doing the meditations from the weekend teachings in the Lam room, I encourage you to combine these two meditations together. When one reflects on the impermanence of this life, that this remarkable opportunity that has been achieved is rapidly coming to an end, and its end could be at any time, we recognize not only must the Dharma be practiced, but it has to be practiced now, and everything else must be put aside. So that's the meditation we have been doing on the weekends. Now, add to this. So with that, I must practice the Dharma means I must guard my mind against the afflictions, apply the antidotes, and do so continuously, because now is the opportunity to do so. This opportunity will be lost. It will come to an end. In fact, for all I know, now is my last opportunity. Death may be around the corner. If one is feeling a strong pull towards following the afflictions, feeling that following the afflictions is what's comfortable because of the deep habituation, call to mind your spiritual teacher. Call to mind and draw on him for courage and strength, that now will be the time that this grasping of the afflicted mind, I will lessen. I'll rather strive to cultivate, to generate intentionally now the antidotes, so that I can loosen this clinging at desire, clinging at anger, and rather rely on the antidotes.
Denigi, that young moment, Mapa by that didn't go up, you go belonging you moment, but Mapa by in that she drona, Dene, Yomo Bedi Genjin, and Kiwachman also gets on risk. Just that the Nassau Kiwana, Nansugi, 지금 동안용 강한용 거에대 이인발이 동안용 거 차기도 왔어. 그래서 냥소의 동안을 탈기도 와 탈고도 와서 배선 봐야. 안디마세 다 등에 제 소수기 요모지 매번 맞아 마방반 등이 제행기 제할이야 판도 같이 주고래 소소 강한 나는 룽도베네 제행sem지기 동안 자야는 다 독서 말하지서 제행sem지 탐지기 동안 자고도 sem지를 되게 주고도 대상하는 요모도 방고도 와서 베게 또 섬들 제할이야 잠이제 베네 거기 동안 이제 타도게 섬 따야다 되네 제할이야 잠이제 섬 따야 근데 되게 섬다기 요모 마방 되게 sem지 탐지기도 산요고봉 주간에 주투고리 제사 산요고만 주고도 대사는 요모 방고 섬다면 sem제 산요고바 되비셔 섬다 자고로 그래서 니네자 니네기 섬다도 그냥 주기 차상이야 두스네 섬는 빼지 두스 10초 섬다도 빼 같이 뭐 섬다에 비시다 야 지금 니네 같이 섬다는 다른 요모 발야 고고게 님부 땡고그래서 비 돌듯이 마시나 돌듯이 돌듯마다 차요 말하다 니네 딜야 요모 비 빵고그래서 비 섬다에도 게디 빵고그래서 다데네 빵고그래서 땡 가르스포트 땡 야포디 땡 토비디를 반마도 요모 방아서 게데 땡데라 가서 텔라 데네 지투야 깔라 카포레스 님부 땡도 깔라 카포레스 데네 땡베 기위신이 랍제게 빼 게디 침보레서 네 게데데 대바테야 세상에 심지어 탐지 코이 요모 마바바는 요모 마바는 님보 땡제 마고 마바는 요모 온게는 예사지 기와치 마선 기루 나서 동안 용고레서 삼다야다 이 데는 나서 동안 용 시안에 간스 판도 주투고레 셴심자도 동안에 제고도와 심지를 디기 주고도 띵한데 간지 제사 심지어 탐지 디기 주야 동안 세야라 미디 마바는 탑민스 삼다야 다 심지어 탐지 된 야치 먹고라 산요고 보마토바 타메데 산요고 토바마던 이 요모 보마바는 산요고가 네 토고레서 비 데니 요즘제 마보 데니 삼다이 오단 요모 바마바다 탑민도 셈비게 단이 버튼 공부 셈비게 셈슐 마서나 셈슐체 예투고 와다 데니게 삼당 고고 와다 소수기 요모 발라 삼다지 요모 등이 요모 두시네 다 추기 랍자로 지금 차상 두시 제고고 와다 차상
So combining these two reflections from the two sets of classes that we are doing, one recognizes just what a valuable opportunity one has right now, and that one has to embrace this opportunity from this very moment forth, because my death can come at any time. There is no certainty amongst us who will die first. It's not done. The death will not necessarily come to the oldest amongst us or the most ill amongst us. There is no certainty. It could be any one of us, and it could be at any time. Moreover, our next rebirth is not a matter of choice. It is something our karma determines. It's under the control of our karma. And if my next rebirth happens to be in the lower realms, not only will I suffer there in ways that are unimaginable to me now, but I'll have no control over my mind, which means my situation will be hopeless. I will have no hope. I will not be able to help myself. No one will be able to help me. Moreover, what about right now, my fellow mother sentient beings? They are in the same position. Their death too can come at any time. Their karma too will dictate their next rebirth. And if their next rebirth is in the lower realms, they will be experiencing that intense pain. So for my own good, as well as for the good of others, I have to, from this moment, strive to abandon the afflictions. I need to take responsibility for my mind and recognize that pushing it back against my habituations, my unwholesome habituations, is challenging, it is uncomfortable, it is difficult, because I'm so habituated to certain afflicted behavior that it feels comfortable. But I need to recognize and have confidence in the Dharma, that is not the way to go, and strive to rather act in accordance with the Dharma, to be conscientious, to rely on the antidotes. And I need to take care of my mind now, so that I can help others. So that at the very least, my interactions with others can be wholesome and beneficial, so that at the very least, I'm not contributing to their arisal of afflictions and their creating causes to fall to the lower realms. And ideally, I can be a positive example, a positive role model in the lives of others. And in this way, not only not harm them, but perhaps even be of benefit. So in this way, one combines these meditations on death and impermanence and their afflictions to generate both definite emergence and compassion. We do so by coming to recognize that there's no way to get free from suffering other than through abandoning the afflictions that abide on our own continuum. And there is no time to do so other than right now. Right now, we each have a precious human rebirth. We are under the care of a spiritual teacher. We have knowledge and we have intelligence. And the truth of the matter is, if we were able to look back across lifetimes, we probably have never had a situation as comfortable as the one we have right now to cultivate the Dharma within. Our life really is quite remarkably comfortable. We have no excuse. There is no valid reason. And moreover, our mother-centered beings need us. Their need is great. Therefore, I need to take responsibility from now for my own mind.
Nyamnati yakbo yongwa shuo, sambi yong lama di dam yichingi la ruchi sa, chila dudu samdaya da. Denigi da nyamnati cheba la kin, chinanga barshe kanya mi yongwa shuo, sambi barshe tu sonro she sa, dena ju shugyo somal ya, ne chinchu she ya la sopa da. Odu si dan dine, denigi nyamnati mudu ji chi tubar shuo, sarab ne sarab tam ji do, denigi nyamnati chi tarshimbar yongwa shuo, sambi da denigi sosugi lama da, je chi gidi ne, nge sanyi kopa nyamnati tarmachi yubado, lama ngosu chi, lama zene chu shi, nyamne chi ko bra war sho sibiki, de molam kya de so anzu ki chi mo che ko le.
This path that we all need to continue to strive in. It is challenging, it's not easy, but you have support. You have support from the Dharma, you have support from your teachers, and you have support from the deities. So I encourage you to call on them. So you sit quietly, you call to mind your teacher, you call to mind your Yidam, and you request their blessings, you request their inspiration, and you draw on their strength, knowing that your spiritual teacher was once an ordinary being just like you, facing the same difficulties. And just like your spiritual teacher relied on their teachers, you now can rely on them. They have walked this path, they have cultivated within, and they are holding you close. Call them to mind. Recognize that it is going to be challenging, but that's okay. You have support, so call on it. Make prayers, ask for blessings or inspiration, and this will aid you in your development.
Rangi sosori ke or tushaba dilia, and Jisu Raja de Chimora, the Tibet Chunson in the Gopja, Yahu Johnson, the Maubene and Modici chicken Sambigi, Jesu Raja, the Samudi, Jia de Chimora, the Negi, that Lumba Delia, Dushin and Ede. The Bene Gangayos, and Yora usage, you had the Bene, Nanzu someone and Yora Delia, somebody, all that Duksha Korea, Mao Korea, Tanganzo Korea, Delia, only Jingan, the Niki Mevache Dusin, and to church, somewhat social church, somewhat by the Malia, the Unguru Korea. There's a pair of Jusha, and being in Yamnache, Yabu Junsa said, so switch to Iran, Susu Kawadi, and they seem to have to do another war. Then, and the Chike, Mao by the Moody Yamnachi, Sambiki, Dubaki, and Dushine. 당아서 진짜 지발에 결혼 당아서 나당 지발에 가서 진짜 지비지기 안에 맞아 개발하는 말 제가 라비아 등 나라다 결혼 자산 알고 어디 나도 시험 걸어서 맞아 양이 결혼 지불라 뒤에 차고 말해
In the previous segment, I gave an additional key advice, which is to rely on the support of your spiritual teachers and your yedam. And an additional piece of advice to make this part easier is every day recognize your tremendous good fortune. Also, recognize your endeavors and rejoice in that. Generate genuine gratitude for the endeavor that you've made in lives gone by, to have this opportunity, to have the incredible comfort and ease we have in this place, and rejoice in the virtue that you're accumulating each day. This is so important because it gives you courage not to feel this is beyond me, it's too difficult, but to recognize what you have achieved, both in lives gone by as well as already in this life, and take strength of mind. Then, when you come to to dedicate, with this dedication, combining with rejoicing, combining with calling on your teachers for strength and guidance, you set the determination to continue. You recognize that what you are embarking on is the spiritual path that all great beings have walked. So you know that you're not alone. You know that nothing here is beyond you. You are being guided in the essential path that all practitioners are embarking on. And what I'm sharing with you isn't advice from me to you, but this is advice of how I live my life, because this is what we all need to do. Until the path is completed, we go engage in the same trainings together. So I'm sitting here, I'm talking to an audience, but I'm also talking to myself. So I invite you to join me in my own journey, because we are continuing to work together to cultivate these paths again together. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for tonight. But if you have some questions, then please feel free to ask. Then thank you very much. Thank you very much.